The House of Horror. Written by Seabury Quinn. Read for you by Edward E. French.
Jules de Grandine, the fierce, amazing, physically fit Frenchman with blonde hair and blue eyes, is an expert occult detective and is amped to lend his aid and investigative skills when called. De Grandine sometimes encounters otherworldly beings, but in some instances he discovers the danger at hand is not supernatural, but simply the horrid acts of people like you or I. Along with his faithful sidekick, Dr. Samuel Trowbridge, he has saved the denizens of Harrisonville, New Jersey, one of the most terrifying places you would ever want to visit, again and again, from the clutches of supernatural entities, ghosts, werewolves, mad scientists, reincarnated Egyptian mummies, worshippers of Satan, myriad evildoers obsessed with immortality and willing to make bargains with any demonic being they could summon, and not unwilling to kidnap, steal, or murder in the process. Gentle listener, you need to enter the Night Stalker world of Jules de Grandine, prepared for mind-blowing weirdness and over-the-top action.
Beauclair, friend Trowbridge, ever care. Jules de Grandine warned as my lurching motor car almost ran into the brimming ditch beside the rain-soaked road. I wrenched the steering wheel viciously and swore softly under my breath as I leaned forward, striving vainly to pierce the curtains of rain which shut us in. No use, old fellow, I confessed, turning to my companion. We're lost. That's all there is to it. He laughed shortly. Do you just begin to discover that fact, my friend Pablo? I have known it this last half hour. Throttling my engine down, I crept along the concrete roadway, peering through my streaming windshield and storm curtains for some familiar landmark. But nothing but blackness, wet and impenetrable, met my eyes. 2 hours before that stormy evening in 1925, answering an insistent phone call, de Grandine and I had left the security of my warm office to administer a dose of toxin-antitoxin to an Italian laborer's child who lay choking with diphtheria in a hut at the workmen's settlement where the new branch of the railroad was being put through. The cold, driving rain and the Stygian darkness of the night had misled me when I made the detour around the railway cut, and for the past hour and a half I had been feeling my way over unfamiliar roads as futilely as a lost child wandering in the woods. Grâce de Dieu, de Grandine exclaimed, seizing my arm with both his small, strong hands. A light! See, there it shines in the night. Come, let us go to it. Even the meanest hovel is preferable to this so villainous rain. I peeped through a joint in the curtains and saw a faint, intermittent light flickering through the driving rain some 200 yards away. All right, I acquiesced, climbing from the car. We've lost so much time already, we probably couldn't do anything for the Vivanti child. And maybe these people can put us on the right road anyway. Plunging through puddles like miniature lakes, soaked by the wind-driven rain, barking our shins again and again on invisible obstacles, we made for the light, finally drawing up to a large, square house of red brick, fronted by an imposing white-pillared porch. Light streamed out through the fanlight over the white door, and from the 2 tall windows flanking the portal. Parbleu, house of circumstance, this, de Grandine commented, mounting the porch and banging lustily at the polished brass knocker. I wrinkled my forehead in thought while he rattled the knocker a second time. Strange, I can't remember this place, I muttered. I thought I knew every building within 30 miles, but this is a new one. Bah, de Grandine interrupted. Always you must be casting a wet blanket on the parade, friend Trowbridge. First you insist on losing us in the midst of a sacre rainstorm. Then when I, Jules de Grandine, find us shelter from the weather, you must needs waste time in wondering why it is you know not the place. Beauclair, you will refuse shelter because you have never been presented to the master of the house if I do not watch you, I fear. But I ought to know the place, de Grandine, I protested. It's certainly imposing enough to... My defense was cut short by the sharp click of a lock, and the wide white door swung inward before us. We strode over the threshold, removing our dripping hats as we did so, and turned to address the person who opened the door. Why, I began, and stared about me in open-mouthed surprise. Name of a little blue man, said Jules de Grandine, and added his incredulous stare to mine. As far as we could see, we were alone in the mansion's imposing hall. Straight before us, perhaps for 40 feet, ran a corridor of parquetry flooring, covered here and there by rich-hued oriental rugs. White-paneled walls, adorned with oil paintings of imposing-looking individuals, rose for 18 feet or so to a beautifully frescoed ceiling, and a graceful curving staircase swept upward from the farther end of the room. Candles in cut-glass sconces lighted the high-ceilinged apartment. The hospitable glow from a log fire burning under the high white marble mantel lent an air of homely coziness to the place. But of anything living, human or animal, there was no faintest trace or sign. Click! Behind us the heavy outer door swung silently on well-oiled hinges, and the automatic lock latched firmly. "Death of my life," de Grandine murmured, reaching for the door's silver-plated knob and giving it a vigorous twist. "Par les moustaches du diable, friend Trowbridge, it is locked. Truly, perhaps it had been better if we had remained outside in the rain." "Not at all, I assure you, my dear sir," a rich, mellow voice answered him from the curve of the stairs. "Your arrival was nothing less than providential, gentlemen." Coming toward us, walking heavily with the aid of a stout cane, was an unusually handsome man attired in pajamas and dressing-gown, a sort of nightcap of flowered silk on his white head, slippers of softest morocco on his feet. "You are a physician, sir?" he asked, glancing inquiringly at the medicine case in my hand. "Yes," I answered. "I am Dr. Samuel Trowbridge from Harrisonville, and this is Dr. Jules de Grandine of Paris, who is my guest." "Ah!" replied our host. "I am very, very glad to welcome you to Marsden Hall, gentlemen. It so happens that my daughter is quite ill, and I have been unable to obtain medical aid for her on account of my infirmities and the lack of a telephone. If I may trespass on your charity to attend my poor child, I shall be delighted to have you as my guests for the night. If you will lay aside your coats." He paused expectantly. "Ah, thank you," as we hung our dripping garments over a chair. "Will you come this way, please?" We followed him up the broad stairs and down an upper corridor to a tastefully furnished chamber where a young girl, 15 years of age perhaps, lay propped up with a pile of diminutive pillows. Annabelle, my love, here are 2 doctors to see you," the old gentleman called softly. The girl moved her fair head with a weary, peevish motion and whimpered softly in her sleep, but gave no further recognition of our presence. "And what have been her symptoms, if you please, monsieur?" de Grandine asked as he rolled back the cuffs of his jacket and prepared to make an examination. "Sleep," replied our host, "just sleep. Some time ago she suffered from influenza. Lately she has been given to fits of protracted slumber, from which I cannot waken her. I fear she may have contracted sleeping sickness, sir. I am told it sometimes follows influenza." De Grandine passed his small, pliable hands rapidly over the girl's cheeks in the region of the ears, felt rapidly along her neck over the jugular vein, then raised a puzzled glance to me. "Have you some laudanum and aconite in your bag, friend Trowbridge?" he asked. "There's some morphine," I answered, "and aconite, but no laudanum." "No matter." He waved his hand impatiently, bustling over the medicine case and extracting 2 small vials from it. "No matter. This will do as well. Some water, if you please, monsieur." He turned to the father, a medicine bottle in each hand. "But, de Grandine," I began, when a sudden kick from one of his slender, heavily shod feet nearly broke my shin. De Grandine, do you think that's the proper medication?" I finished lamely. "Oh, mais oui, undoubtedly," he replied. "Nothing else would do in this case." "Water, if you please, monsieur," he repeated again, addressing the father. I stared at him in ill-disguised amazement as he extracted a pellet from each of the bottles and quickly ground them to powder while the old gentleman filled a tumbler with water from the porcelain pitcher which stood on the chintz-draped washstand in the corner of the chamber. He was as familiar with the arrangement of my medicine case as I was, I knew, and knew that my vials were arranged in numbers instead of being labeled. Deliberately, I saw, he had passed over the morphine and aconite and had chosen 2 bottles of plain, unmedicated sugar-of-milk pills. What his object was, I had no idea, but I watched him measure out 4 teaspoonfuls of water, dissolve the powder in it, and pour the sham medication down the unconscious girl's throat. "Good!" he proclaimed as he washed the glass with meticulous care. "She will rest easily until the morning, monsieur. When daylight comes, we shall decide on further treatment. Will you now permit that we retire?" He bowed politely to the master of the house, who returned his courtesy and led us to a comfortably furnished room farther down the corridor. "Stay here, de Grandine," I demanded when our host had wished us a pleasant good night and closed the door upon us. "What was your idea in giving that child an impotent dose like that?" "Shh!" He cut me short with a fierce whisper. "That young girl, mon ami, is no more suffering from encephalitis than you or I. There is no characteristic swelling of the face or neck, no diagnostic hardening of the jugular vein. Her temperature was a bit subnormal, it is true, but upon her breath I detected the odor of chloral hydrate. For some reason, good, I hope, but bad, I fear, she is drugged. And I thought it best to play the fool and pretend I believed the man's statements. Pardieu, the fool who knows himself no fool has an immense advantage over the fool who believes him one, my friend. But me no buts, friend Trowbridge. Remember how the door of this house opened with none to touch it? Recall how it closed behind us in the same way. And observe this, if you will." Stepping softly, he crossed the room, pulled aside the chintz curtains at the window, and tapped lightly on the frame which held the thick plate-glass panes. "Regardez-vous," he ordered, tapping the frame a second time. Like every other window I had seen in the house, this one was of the casement type, small panes of heavy glass being sunk into lattice-like frames. Under de Grandine's directions, I tapped the latter, and found them not painted wood, as I had supposed, but stoutly welded and bolted metal. Also, to my surprise, I found the turnbuckles for opening the casement were only dummies, the metal frames being actually securely bolted to the stone sills. To all intents, we were as firmly incarcerated as though serving a sentence in the state penitentiary. "The door," I began, but he shook his head. Obeying his gesture, I crossed the room and turned the handle lightly. It twisted under the pressure of my fingers, but though we had heard no warning click of lock or bolt, the door itself was as firmly fastened as though nailed shut. "Why?" I asked stupidly. "What's it all mean, de Grandine?" "Je ne sais quoi," he answered with a shrug. "But one thing I know, I like not this house, friend Trowbridge. Above the hissing of the rain against the windows and the howl of the sea wind about the gables, there suddenly rose a scream, wire-edged with inarticulate terror, freighted with utter, transcendental anguish of body and soul. "Cordieu!" He threw up his head like a hound hearing the call of the pack from far away. "Did you hear it too, friend Trowbridge?" "Of course," I answered, every nerve in my body trembling in horripilation with the echo of the hopeless wail. "Pardieu!" he repeated. "I like this house less than ever now. Come, let us move this dresser before our door. It is safer that we sleep behind barricades this night, I think." We blocked the door, and I was soon sound asleep. Trowbridge, my friend." De Grandine drove a sharp elbow into my ribs. "Wake up, I beseech you. In the name of a green goat, you lie like one dead, save for your so abominable snoring." I answered sleepily, thrusting myself deeper beneath the voluminous bedclothes. Despite the unusual occurrences of the night, I was tired to the point of exhaustion and fairly drunk with sleep. "Up! Arise, my friend," he ordered, shaking me excitedly. "The coast is clear, I think, and it is high time we did some exploring." "Rats!" I scoffed, disinclined to leave my comfortable couch. What's the use of wandering about a strange house to gratify a few unfounded suspicions? The girl might have been given a dose of chlorohydrate, but the chances are her father thought he was helping her when he gave it. As for these trick devices for opening and locking doors, the old man apparently lives here alone and has installed these mechanical aids to lessen his work. He has to hobble about with a cane, you know. "Ah," my companion assented sarcastically. "And that scream we heard, did he install that as an aid to his infirmities also?" "Perhaps the girl woke up with a nightmare," I hazarded, but he made an impatient gesture. Perhaps the moon is composed of green cheese also, he replied. Up and dress, my friend. This house should be investigated while yet there is time. Attend me. But 5 minutes ago, through this very window, I did observe Monsieur, our host, attired in a raincoat, depart from his own front door, and without his cane. Parbleu, he did skip as agilely as any boy. I assure you, even now he is almost at the spot where we abandoned your automobile. What he intends doing there, I know not. What I intend doing, I know full well. Do you accompany me or not? Oh, I suppose so, I agreed, crawling from the bed and slipping into my clothes. How are you going to get past that locked door? He flashed me one of his sudden smiles, shooting the points of his little blonde mustache upward like the horns of an inverted crescent. Observe, he ordered, displaying a short length of thin wire. In the days when a woman's hair was still her crowning glory, what mighty deeds a lady could encompass with a hairpin. Pardieu! There was one little grisette in Paris who showed me some tricks in the days before the war. Regard me, if you please. Deftly he thrust the pliable loop of wire into the key's hole, twisting it tentatively back and forth, at length pulling it out and regarding it carefully. Très bien, he muttered as he reached into an inside pocket, bringing out a heavier bit of wire. See, he displayed the finer wire. With this I take an impression of that lock's tumblers now. Quickly he bent the heavier wire to conform to the waved outline of the lighter loop. Voila! I have a key! And he had. The lock gave readily to the pressure of his improvised key, and we stood in the long, dark hall, staring about us half curiously, half fearfully. This way, if you please, de Grandine ordered. First we will look upon La Jeunesse and see how it goes with her. We walked on tiptoe down the corridor, entered the chamber where the girl lay, and approached the bed. She was lying with her hands folded upon her breast in the manner of those composed for their final rest, her wide, periwinkled blue eyes staring sightlessly before her, the short, tightly curled ringlets of her blonde, bobbed hair surrounding her drawn, pallid face like a golden nimbus encircling the ivory features of a saint in some carved icon. My companion approached the bed softly, placing one hand on the girl's wrist with professional precision. Temperature low. Pulse weak, he murmured, checking off her symptoms. Complexion pale, to the point of lividity. Now for the eyes. Sleeping, her pupils should have been contracted, while they should now be dilated. Dieu, Trowbridge, my friend, come here. Look, he commanded, pointing to the apathetic girl's face. Those eyes! Grand Dieu, those eyes! It is a sacrilege, nothing less. I looked into the girl's face, then started back with a half-suppressed cry of horror. Asleep as she had been when we first saw her, the child had been pretty to the point of loveliness. Her features were small and regular, clean-cut as those of a face in a cameo. The tendrils of her light yellow hair had lent her a dainty, ethereal charm comparable to that of a Dresden china shepherdess. It had needed but the raising of her delicate, long-lashed eyelids to give her face the animation of some laughing sprite playing truant from fairyland. Her lids were raised now, but the eyes they unveiled were no clear, joyous windows of a tranquil soul. Rather, they were the peepholes of a spirit in torment. The irises were a lovely shade of blue, it is true, but the optics themselves were things of horror. Rolling grotesquely to right and left, they peered futilely in opposite directions, lending to her sweet pale face the half-ludicrous, wholly hideous expression of a bloating frog. Good heavens! I exclaimed, turning from the deformed girl with a feeling of disgust akin to nausea. What a terrible affliction! De Grandine made no reply, but bent over the girl's still form, gazing intently at her malformed eyes. It is not natural, he announced. The muscles have been tampered with, and tampered with by someone who is a master hand at surgery. Will you get me your syringe and some strychnine, friend Trowbridge? This one is still unconscious. I hastened to our bedroom and returned with the hypodermic and stimulant, then stood beside him, watching eagerly as he administered a strong injection. The girl's narrow chest fluttered as the powerful drug took effect, and the pale lids dropped for a second over her repulsive eyes. Then, with a sob, which was half moan, she attempted to raise herself on her elbow, fell back again, and with apparent effort gasped, "The mirror! Let me have the mirror! Oh, tell me it isn't true. Tell me it was a trick of some sort. Oh, the horrible thing I saw in the glass couldn't have been I. Was it?"
"Tiens, ma petite," de Grandine replied. "But you speak in riddles. What is it you would know?"
He, the girl faltered weakly, forcing her trembling lips to frame the words. "That horrible old man showed me a mirror a little while ago and said the face in it was mine. Oh, it was horrible, horrible."
What is this?" de Grandine demanded on a rising note. "Horrible old man? Are you not his daughter? Is he not your father?"
"No," the girl gasped so low her denial was scarcely audible. "I was driving home from Macclesdale last... I forget when it was, but it was at night, and my tires punctured. I think there must have been glass on the road, for the shoes were cut to ribbons. I saw the light in this house and came to ask for help. An old man. I thought he was so nice and kind. Let me in and said he was all alone here and about to eat dinner, and asked me to join him. I ate some, I don't remember what it was, and the next thing I knew he was standing by my bed, holding a mirror up to me and telling me it was my face I saw in the glass. Oh, please, please tell me it was some terrible trick he played on me. I'm not truly hideous, am I?"
"Morbleu," de Grandine muttered softly, tugging at the ends of his moustache. "What is all this?"
To the girl he said,
"But of course not. You are like a flower, mademoiselle, a little flower that dances in the wind. You and my eyes, they aren't...
She interrupted with piteous eagerness. "Please tell me they aren't."
"Mais non, ma chère," he assured her. "Your eyes are like the pervenche that mirrors the sky in springtime. They are... Let me see the mirror, please," she interrupted in an anxious whisper. "I'd like to see for myself, if you... I feel weak inside." She lapsed back against the pillow, her lids mercifully veiling the hideously distorted eyes and restoring her face to tranquil beauty.
"Cordieu," de Grandine breathed. The chloral reasserted itself none too soon for Jules de Grandine's comfort, friend Trowbridge. "Sooner would I have gone to the rack than have shown that pitiful child her face in a mirror." "But what's it all mean?" I asked. "She says she came here, and the rest remains for us to find out, I think," he replied evenly. "Come, we lose time, and to lose time is to be caught, my friend." De Grandine led the way down the hall, peering eagerly into each door we passed in search of the owner's chamber, but before his quest was satisfied he stopped abruptly at the head of the stairs. "Observe, friend Trowbridge," he ordered, pointing a carefully manicured forefinger to a pair of buttons, one white, one black, set in the wall. "Unless I am more mistaken than I think I am, we have here the key to the situation, or at least to the front door." He pushed vigorously at the white button, then ran to the curve of the stairs to note the result. Sure enough, the heavy door swung open on its hinges of cast bronze, letting gusts of rain drive into the lower hall.
"Parbleu!" he ejaculated. "We have here the open sesame.
Let us see if we possess the closing secret as well. Press the black button, Trowbridge, my friend, while I watch." I did his bidding, and a delighted exclamation told me the door had closed. "Now what?" I asked, joining him on the stairway. He pulled first one, then the other end of his diminutive mustache meditatively. "The house possesses its attractions, friend Trowbridge, but I believe it would be well if we went out to observe what our friend La Vian Horrible does. I like not to have one who shows young girls their disfigured faces in mirrors near our conveyance." Slipping into our raincoats, we opened the door, taking care to place a wad of paper on the sill to prevent its closing tightly enough to latch, and scurried out into the storm. As we left the shelter of the porch, a shaft of indistinct light shone through the rain as my car was swung from the highway and headed toward a depression to the left of the house. "Parbleu! Here's a thief, this one!" de Grandine exclaimed excitedly. "Hola, monsieur!" He ran forward, swinging his arms like a pair of semaphores. "What sort of business is it you make with our moteur?" The wailing of the storm tore the words from his lips and hurled them away, but the little Frenchman was not to be thwarted. "Parbleu!" he gasped, bending his head against the wind-driven rain. "I will stop this scoundrel if— Nom d'un coq, he has done it!" Even as he spoke, the old man flung open the car's forward door and leaped, allowing the machine to go crashing down a low, steep embankment into a lake of slimy swamp mud. For a moment the vandal stood contemplating his work, then burst into a peal of wild laughter, more malignant than any profanity. "Parbleu, robber! Apache! You shall laugh from the other side of your mouth," de Grandine promised as he made for the old man. But the other seemed oblivious of our presence. Still chuckling at his work, he turned toward the house, stopped short as a sudden heavy gust of wind shook the trees along the roadway, then started forward with a yell of terror as a great branch, torn bodily from a towering oak tree, came crashing toward the earth. He might as well have attempted to dodge a meteorite. Like an arrow from the bow of divine justice, the great timber hurled down, pinning his frail body to the ground like a worm beneath a laborer's brogan. "Trowbridge, my friend," de Grandine announced matter-of-factly. "Observe the evil effects of stealing motor cars." We lifted the heavy bough from the prostrate man and turned him over on his back. De Grandine on one side, I on the other, we made a hasty examination, arriving at the same finding simultaneously. His spinal column was snapped like a pipe stem. "You have some last statement to make, monsieur?" de Grandine asked curtly. "If so, you had best be about it. Your time is short." "Yes," the stricken man replied weakly. I meant to kill you, for you might have hit upon my secret. As it is, you may publish it to the world, that all may know what it meant to offend a Marston. In my room you will find the documents. My pets are in the cellar. She was to have been one of them." The pauses between his words became longer and longer. His voice grew weaker with each labored syllable. As he whispered the last sentence painfully, there was a gurgling sound, and a tiny stream of blood welled up at the corner of his mouth. His narrow chest rose and fell once with a convulsive movement, then his jaw dropped limply. He was dead. "Uh-huh," de Grandine remarked. "It is a hemorrhage which finished him. A broken rib piercing his lung, eh? I should have guessed it. Come, my friend, let us carry him to the house. Then see what he meant by that talk of documents and pets. A pest upon the fellow for dying with his riddle half explained. Did he not know that Jules de Grandine cannot resist the challenge of a riddle? Parbleu, we will solve this mystery, Monsieur Lemont, if we have to hold an autopsy to do so." "Oh, for heaven's sake, hush, de Grandine," I besought, shocked at his heartlessness. "The man is dead." "Ah, bah!" he returned scornfully. "Dead or not, did he not steal your motor car?" We laid our gruesome burden on the hall couch and mounted the stairs to the second floor, with de Grandine in the lead. We found the dead man's room and began a systematic search for the papers he had mentioned, almost with his last breath. After some time, my companion unearthed a thick, leather-bound portfolio from the lower drawer of a beautiful old mahogany highboy and spread its wide leaves open on the white counterpaned bed. He drew forth several papers and held them to the light. "We begin to make progress, friend Trowbridge." "What is this?" He held out a newspaper clipping cracked from long folding and yellowed with age. It read, "Actress jilts surgeon's crippled son on eve of wedding." Declaring she could not stand the sight of his deformity, and that she had engaged herself to him only in a moment of thoughtless pity, Dora Lee, well-known variety actress, last night repudiated her promise to marry John Beersfield Marston, Jr., hopelessly crippled son of Dr. John Beersfield Marston, the well-known surgeon and expert osteologist. Neither the abandoned bridegroom nor his father could be seen by reporters from the Planet last night. Very good, de Grandine nodded. We need go no farther with that account. A young woman, it would seem, once broke her promise to marry a cripple. And judging from this paper's date, that was in 1896. Here is another. What do you make of it? The clipping he handed me read as follows. Surgeon's son, a suicide. Still sitting in the wheelchair from which he has not moved during his waking hours since he was hopelessly crippled while playing polo in England 10 years ago. John Beersfield Marston, son of the famous surgeon of the same name, was found in his bedroom this morning by his valet. A rubber hose was connected with a gas jet, the other end being held in the young man's mouth. Young Marston was jilted by Dora Lee, a well-known vaudeville actress, on the day before the date set for their wedding 1 month ago. He is reported to have been extremely low-spirited since the desertion of his fiancée. Dr. Marston, the bereaved father, when seen by reporters from the Planet this morning, declared that the actress was responsible for his son's death and announced his intention of holding her accountable. When asked if legal proceedings were contemplated, he declined further information. So, de Grandine nodded shortly. Now this one, if you please. The third clipping was brief to the point of curtness. Well-known surgeon retires. Dr. John Beersfield Marston, widely known throughout this section of the country as an expert in operations concerning the bones, has announced his intention of retiring from practice. His house has been sold, and he will move from the city. The record is clear so far, de Grandine asserted, studying the first clipping with raised eyebrows. But, morbleu, my friend, look at this picture. This Dora Lee, of whom does she remind you, huh? I took the clipping again and looked intently at the illustration of the article announcing young Marston's broken engagement. The woman in the picture was young and inclined to be overdressed in the voluminous, fluffy mode of the days before the Spanish-American War. No one whom I know, I began, but halted abruptly as a sudden likeness struck me. Despite the towering pompadour arrangement of her blonde hair and the unbecoming straw sailor hat above the coiffure, the woman in the picture bore a certain resemblance to the disfigured girl we had seen a half-hour before. The Frenchman saw recognition dawn in my face and nodded agreement. But of course, he said, now the question is the young girl whose eyes are so out of alignment a relative of this Dora Lee, or is the resemblance a coincidence? And if so, what lies behind it, eh? I don't know, I admitted, but there must be some connection. Connection? Of course there is a connection, de Grandine affirmed, rummaging deeper in the portfolio. Ah, what is this? Nom de nom, friend Trowbridge, I think I smell the daylight. Look! He held a full-page story from one of the sensational New York dailies before him, his eyes glued to the flowing type and crude, coarse-screened halftones of half a dozen young women which composed the article. What has become of the missing girls? I read in bold-faced type across the top of the page. Are sinister, unseen hands reaching out from the darkness to seize our girls from palace and hovel, shop, stage, and office? The article asked rhetorically. Where are Ellen Munro and Dorothy Sawyer and Phyllis Boucher and 3 other lovely light-haired girls who have walked into oblivion during the past year? I read to the end of the sensational account of the girls' disappearances. The cases seemed fairly similar. Each of the vanished young women had failed to return to her home and had never been accounted for in any manner, and in no instance, according to the newspaper, had there been any assignable reason for voluntary departure. Parbleu, but he was stupid. Even for a journalist, de Grandine asserted, as I completed my inspection of the story. Why, I wager even my good friend Trowbridge has already noticed one important fact which this writer has treated as though it were as commonplace as the nose on his face. Sorry to disappoint you, old chap, I answered, but it looks to me as though the reporter had covered the case from every possible angle. So? He replied sarcastically. Morbleu, we shall have to consult the oculist in your behalf when we return home, my friend. Look, I beseech you, upon the pictures of these so totally absent and unaccounted for young women, cher ami, and tell me if you do not observe a certain likeness among them, not only a resemblance to each other, but to that Mademoiselle Lee, who jilted the son of Dr. Marston. Can you see it, now I have pointed it out? No. Why, yes, of course, I responded, running my eye over the pictures accompanying the story. By the Lord Harry de Grandine, you're right. You might almost say there is a family resemblance between these girls. You've put your finger on it, I do believe. Gilad, no, he answered with a shrug. I've put my finger on nothing as yet, my friend. I reach, I grope, I feel about me like a blind man, tormented by a crowd of naughty little boys. But nothing do the poor fingers of my mind encounter. Pah! Jules de Grandine, you are a great fool. Think, stupid one. He seated himself on the edge of the bed, cupping his face in his hands and leaning forward till his elbows rested on his knees. Suddenly he sprang erect, one of his elfish smiles passing across his small, regular features. Non donc chatrou, my friend, I have it, he announced. The pets that old stealer of motor cars spoke of. They are in the basement. Pardieu, but we will see those pets, cher Trowbridge. With our 4 collective eyes, we will see them. Did not that so execrable stealer declare that she was to have been one of them? Now, in the name of Satan and brimstone, whom could he have meant by she, if not that unfortunate child with the eyes like La Grenouille, eh? Why, I began, but he waved me forward. Come, let us go, he urged. I am impatient, I am restless, I am not to be restrained. We shall investigate and see for ourselves what sort of pets are kept by one who shows young girls their deformed faces in mirrors and, parbleu, steals motor cars from my friends. Hurrying down the main stairway, we hunted about for the cellar entrance, finally located the door, and holding above our heads a pair of candles from the hall, began descending a flight of rickety steps into a pitch-black basement, rock-walled and, judging by its damp, moldy odor, unfloored save by a bare, moist earth beneath the house. Parbleu, the dungeons of the chateau at Carcassonne are more cheerful than this, de Grandine commented as he paused at the stairs' foot, holding his candle aloft to make a better inspection of the dismal place. I suppressed a shudder of mingled chill and apprehension as I stared at the blank stone walls, unpierced by windows or other openings of any sort, and made ready to retrace my steps. Nothing here, I announced. You can see that with half an eye. The place is as empty as... Perhaps, friend Trowbridge, he agreed, but Jules de Grandine does not look with half an eye. He uses both eyes, and uses them more than once if his first glance does not prove sufficient. Behold that bit of wood on the earth yonder. What do you make of it? Piece of flooring, maybe? I hazarded. Maybe yes, maybe no, he answered. Let us see. Crossing the cellar, he bent above the planks, then turned to me with a satisfied smile. Flooring does not ordinarily have ring bolts in it, my friend, he remarked, bending to seize the iron ring which was made fast to the boards by a stout staple. Ah! As he heaved upward, the planks came away from the black earth, disclosing a floor-lined well about 3 feet square and of uncertain depth. An almost vertical ladder of 2x4 timbers led downward from the trap-door to the well's impenetrable blackness. Allons, we descend, he commented, turning about and setting his foot on the topmost rung of the ladder. Don't be a fool, I advised. You don't know what's down there. True, his head was level with the floor as he answered, but I shall know with luck in a few moments. Do you come? I sighed with vexation as I prepared to follow him. At the ladder's foot he paused, raising his candle and looking about inquiringly. Directly before us was a passageway through the earth, sealed with heavy planks and shored up with timbers like the lateral workings of a primitive mine. Ah, the plot shows complications, he murmured, stepping briskly into the dark tunnel. Do you come, friend Trowbridge? I followed, wondering what manner of thing might be at the end of the black, musty passage. But nothing but fungus-grown timbers and walls of moist black earth met my questing gaze. De Grandine preceded me by some paces, and I suppose we had gone 15 feet through the passage, when a gasp of mingled surprise and horror from my companion brought me beside him in 2 long strides. Fastened with nails to the timbers at each side of the tunnel were a number of white, glistening objects. Objects which, because of their very familiarity, denied their identity to my wondering eyes. There was no mistaking the things. Even a layman could not have failed to recognize them for what they were. I, as a physician, knew them even better. To the right of the passage hung 14 perfectly articulated skeletons of human legs, complete from foot to ilium, gleaming white and ghostly in the flickering light of the candles. "Good heavens!" I exclaimed. "Sang du diable!" Jules de Grandine commented. "Behold what is there, my friend." He pointed to the opposite wall. 14 bony arms, complete from hand to shoulder joint, hung pendulously from the tunnel's upright timbers. "Parbleu!" de Grandine muttered. "I have known men who collected stuffed birds and dried insects. I have known those who stored away Egyptian mummies, even the skulls of men long dead. But never before have I seen a collection of arms and legs. Parbleu, he was caduc, mad as a hatter, this one, or I am much mistaken." "So these were his pets?" I answered. "Yes, the man was undoubtedly mad to keep such a collection in a place like this. Poor fellow." "Nom de canard!" de Grandine broke in. "What was that?" From the darkness before us there came a queer, inarticulate sound, such as a man might make attempting to speak with a mouth half filled with food, and as though the noise had wakened an echo slumbering in the cavern, the sound was repeated, multiplied again and again, till it resembled the babbling of half a dozen overgrown infants, or an equal number of full-grown imbeciles. "Onward!" Responding to the challenge of the unknown, like a warrior obeying the trumpet's call to charge, de Grandine dashed toward the strange noise, swung about, flashing his candle this side and that. Then, "Nom de Dieu, he almost shrieked. "Look, friend Trowbridge, look, and say you see what I see, or have I, too, gone mad?" Lined up against the wall was a series of 7 small wooden boxes, each with a door composed of upright slats before it, similar in construction to the coops in which country folk pen brooding hens, and no larger. In each of the hutches huddled an object, the like of which I had never before seen, even in the terrors of nightmare. The things had the torsos of human beings, though hideously shrunken from starvation and encrusted with scales of filth, but there all resemblances to mankind ceased. From shoulders and waist there twisted flaccid tentacles of unsupported flesh, the upper ones terminating in flat paddle-like flippers which had some remote resemblance to hands, the lower ones ending in almost shapeless stubs which resembled feet, only in that each had a fringe of 5 shriveled, unsupported protuberances of withered flesh. On scrawny necks were balanced caricatures of faces, flat, noseless, chinless countenances with horrible crossed or divergent eyes, mouths widened almost beyond resemblance to buccal orifices, and, horror of horrors, elongated, split tongues protruding several inches from the lips and wagging impotently in vain efforts to form words. "Satan, thou art outdone!" de Grandine cried as he held his candle before a scrap of paper decorating one of the cages after the manner of a sign before an animal's den at the zoo. "Observe," he ordered, pointing a shaking finger at the notice. I looked, then recoiled, sick with horror. The paper bore the picture and name of Ellen Monroe, one of the girls mentioned as missing in the newspaper article we had found in the dead man's bedroom. Beneath the photograph was scribbled in an irregular hand, "Paid, 1-25-97. Sick at heart, we walked down the line of pens. Each was labeled with the picture of a young and pretty girl with the notation, "Paid," followed by a date. Every girl named as missing in the newspaper was represented in the cages. Last of all, in a coop somewhat smaller than the rest, we found a body more terribly mutilated than any. This was marked with the photograph and name of Dora Lee. Beneath her name was the date of her payment, written in bold red figures, Parbleu, what are we to do, my friend? De Grandine asked in an hysterical whisper. We cannot return these poor ones to the world. That would be the worst form of cruelty. Yet I shrink from the act of mercy I know they would ask me to perform if they could speak. Let's go up, I begged. We must think this thing over, de Grandine, and if I stay here any longer, I shall faint. Bien, he agreed, and turned to follow me from the cavern of horrors. It is to consider, he began as we reached the upper hall once more. If we give those so pitiful ones the stroke of mercy, we are murderers before the law. Yet what service could we render them by bringing them once more into the world? The choice is a hard one, my friend. I nodded. Morbleu, but he was clever, that one, the Frenchman continued, half to me, half to himself. What a surgeon! 14 instances of Wyeth's amputation of the hip and as many more of the shoulder, and every patient lived to suffer the tortures of that hellhole down there. But it is marvelous. None but a madman could have done it. Bethink you, friend Trowbridge. Think how the mighty man of medicine brooded over the suicide of his crippled son, meditating hatred and vengeance for the heartless woman who had jilted him. Then, snap, went his great mentality, and from hating one woman, he fell to hating all, to plot vengeance against the many for the sin of the one. And, Dieu, what a vengeance! How he must have laid plans to secure his victims. How he must have worked to prepare that hell under the earth to house those poor broken bodies which were his handiwork. And how he must have drawn upon the great surgical skill which was his, even in his madness, to transform those once lovely ones into the visions of horror we have just beheld. Horror of horrors! To remove the bones and let the girls still live. What to do? What to do? He demanded, striking his open hands against his forehead. I followed his nervous steps with my eyes, but my brain was too numbed by the hideous things I had just seen to be able to respond to his question. I looked hopelessly past him at the angle of the wall by the great fireplace, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Slowly but surely, the wall was declining from the perpendicular. De Grandine, I shouted, glad of some new phenomenon to command my thoughts. The wall! The wall's leaning! Eh? The wall? He queried. Pardieu, yes! It is the rain. The foundations are undermined. Quick, my friend, to the cellars or those unfortunate ones are undone. We scrambled down the stairs leading to the basement, but already the earth floor was sopping with water. The well leading to the madman's sub-cellar was more than half full of bubbling, earthy ooze. Mary have pity, de Grandine exclaimed. Like rats in a trap they did die. God rest their tired souls. He shrugged his shoulders as he turned to retrace his steps. It is better so. Now, friend Trowbridge, do you hasten aloft to bring down that young girl from the room above. We must run for it if we do not wish to be crushed under the falling timbers of this house of abominations. The storm had half spent itself, and a red springtime sun was peeping over the horizon as de Grandine and I trudged up my front steps with the mutilated girl stumbling wearily between us. We had managed to flag a car when we got out. Put her to bed, my excellent one, de Grandine ordered Nora, my housekeeper, who came to meet us enveloped in righteous indignation, an outing flannel nightgown. Parbleu, she has had many troubles. In the study, a glass of steaming whiskey and hot water in one hand, a vile-smelling French cigarette in the other, he faced me across the desk. How was it you knew not that house, my friend? He demanded. I grinned sheepishly. I took the wrong turning at the detour, I explained, and got on the Yerberville road. It's just recently been hard-surfaced, and I haven't used it for years because it was always impassable. Thinking we were on the Andover Pike all the while, I never connected the place with the old Olmsted mansion I'd seen hundreds of times from the road. Ah, yes, he agreed thoughtfully. A little turn from the right way, and poof! What a distance we have to retrace. Now, about the girl upstairs, I began, but he waved the question aside. The mad one had but begun his devil's work on her, he replied. I, Jules de Grandine, will operate on her eyes and make them as straight as before. nor will I accept 1 penny for my work. Meantime, we must find her kindred and notify them she is safe and in good hands. And now, he handed me his empty tumbler. A little more whiskey, if you please, friend Trowbridge. The end of The House of Horror, written by Seabury Quinn and told to you by Edward E. French. This recording of The House of Horror is copyright 2024 by Edward E. French. Inquiries should be addressed to email edwardfrench06@hotmail.com. Good night.